Are we really back here talking about this again? Unfortunately, yes. Everyone watching needs to take a moment and think about what just unfolded, because what we witnessed was unbelievable. A night that was supposed to be remembered as a historic celebration for women's basketball somehow turned into a complete disaster. The Indiana Fever suffered a painful and frustrating 90-88 loss to the Golden State Valkyries, but the final score barely scratches the surface of what actually happened. Because if you're only looking at the scoreboard, you're missing the bigger story entirely. What should have been a night dedicated to greatness and a record-breaking performance ended up being overshadowed by questionable officiating, costly coaching decisions, and a sequence of events that completely changed the conversation. Instead of focusing on history being made, fans were left talking about everything that went wrong. But before we get into the controversy, let's talk about the history, because it deserves to be recognized no matter what the outcome was. Tonight at Chase Center, Caitlin Clark accomplished something that should be leading sports headlines everywhere. During the first half, she recorded the 500th assist of her WNBA career, and while that number alone is impressive, the real story is how quickly she reached it. With that milestone assist, Clark officially became the fastest player in WNBA history to record both 1,000 career points and 500 career assists. She achieved the feat in only 59 games. Think about that for a second. Just 59 games. Sue Bird, widely regarded as one of the greatest point guards the league has ever seen, needed 82 games to reach the same mark. Sabrina Ionescu, one of the most versatile guards in the modern era, took 84 games. Hall of Fame legend Dawn Staley required 101 games to get there. Caitlin Clark did it in 59. That's 23 fewer games than Sue Bird and dramatically faster than several all-time greats who helped define the sport. This isn't just another statistic or milestone. It's the type of achievement that belongs alongside some of the most remarkable records in women's professional basketball. It's a historic accomplishment that deserves recognition, respect, and a permanent place in the WNBA record books, regardless of how the game ultimately ended.
Fever. Caitlin Clark did make history tonight. We gonna talk about it, man, in an iconic fashion. She ended up making her 500 assists to Sophie Cunningham, but the referees is still in the show. Just ultimately still.
The speed at which Caitlin Clark continues to reach these milestones is unlike anything the WNBA has ever seen. She is already the first player in league history to record multiple games with 30 or more points and 10 or more assists in the same season. And what's even more impressive is that she's accomplishing all of this while being the primary focus of every opposing defense she faces. Even with constant pressure and defenders keying in on her every move, Clark still put together another solid performance tonight. She finished with 16 points, 4 rebounds, and 6 assists, while also contributing 3 important steals on the defensive end. But then the second half arrived, and that's where the excitement surrounding this historic night started to fade and the frustration began to take over. Very few people in the national media seem willing to address what happened with the officiating, but it was impossible to ignore. Caitlin Clark was visibly upset throughout stretches of the second half, repeatedly reacting in disbelief to calls, or the lack of them, and it wasn't difficult to understand why. Time after time, Clark attacked the basket aggressively, drove into traffic, and absorbed significant contact from Golden State defenders. Yet possession after possession, the whistle remained silent. The frustration continued to build. She openly voiced her displeasure to the officials, asking for consistency and for the contact she was taking to be acknowledged. Eventually, that frustration boiled over. Clark was assessed a controversial technical foul after reacting to a play in which she appeared to take clear contact on the arm during a drive with no foul being called. That technical ended up carrying major consequences in a game decided by just 2 points. The Fever lost 90-88. Those free throws resulting from the technical foul may seem small in isolation, but in a game that close, every point matters. 2 points can completely alter momentum, change late game decisions, and ultimately determine the outcome. What's especially noteworthy is that Clark was perfect from the free throw line, going 8 for 8 on the night, but anyone who watched the game could see that she attacked the paint far more often than 8 free throws would suggest. There were numerous possessions where she absorbed heavy contact and still came away empty-handed from a whistle perspective. For a player of Clark's stature, the officiating simply did not feel consistent throughout the night. It's a concern that many fans have raised repeatedly since the beginning of the season, and this game only added more fuel to that discussion. However, as much criticism as the officiating will receive, it wasn't the only issue. Attention also has to turn toward the Indiana Fever bench, because Stephanie White's game management raised plenty of questions as well. In a tightly contested matchup where every possession mattered, several of the rotation decisions were difficult to understand. The substitutions often disrupted the team's rhythm, and at key moments the offensive flow seemed to disappear completely. What should have been a composed approach in a close game instead left fans wondering whether the Fever helped create some of their own problems down the stretch.
24 fouls called on the fucking Fever tonight. Excuse my language, bro. 19 calls were now 20 on Golden State. I'm furious right now, bro, because that's how bad this game has been. Stephanie White put Caitlin on the ball. Stephanie White put Caitlin off the ball. Like, damn, Stephanie, make up your mind. Did Caitlin Clark set majority of the damn third quarter? This was just buffoonery.
One moment, Stephanie White had Caitlin Clark controlling the offense exactly the way she should be, bringing the ball up the floor, setting the tempo, reading defensive coverages, and creating quality opportunities for everyone around her. Then, just a few possessions later, Clark was moved off the ball entirely, parked in the corner, and reduced to watching the offense slow down into predictable isolation sets. But the most confusing decision of the entire night came during the critical stretch of the third quarter. For reasons that remain difficult to understand, White kept Caitlin Clark on the bench for much of one of the most important periods of the game. When you have arguably the most dangerous offensive weapon in basketball sitting on your roster, a player who had already added another historic achievement to her career, treating her like a complimentary piece instead of the focal point of the team makes little sense. As a result of those inconsistent rotations and constant changes, Clark never had the chance to establish a real offensive rhythm. Instead of building momentum, she was repeatedly taken out of the flow of the game and forced to re-enter against a defense that was specifically focused on making every possession difficult. The impact showed up in the numbers. Clark finished the night with an unusually inefficient shooting performance, going just 3 for 12 from the field and hitting only 2 of her 6 attempts from beyond the arc. For a player capable of taking over a game at any moment, it was a stat line that reflected how difficult it was for her to ever get comfortable within the offense.
I'm hella mad. Look at this. How the hell can we win when they look at this flop? You ain't even get hit. She ain't even get hit in the head, dog. She ain't even get hit in the head. Y'all see this? Bro, this has been all day.
But the questionable coaching decisions didn't end with Caitlin Clark, not even close. In fact, that's where the situation becomes even harder to understand. Take a look at the box score and pay attention to who never saw the floor. Michaela Timpson, the athletic forward brought in to help strengthen the Fever's frontcourt depth, received a DNP, coach's decision. Not a single minute played. Natasha Howard played, so if the original script intended another player, that name would need verification. Damiris Dantas was also left out of the rotation with a DNP, coach's decision. Meanwhile, Indiana relied on just 9 active players during a hard-fought road game that ultimately came down to 2 points. Several players who could have provided fresh energy, additional size, or defensive flexibility spent the entire night watching from the bench. That's what makes the situation so frustrating. The Fever made roster additions specifically to improve their depth, add more athleticism around the front court, and give the coaching staff additional options when games became physical. Yet when those options were available, they were barely or never used. Every time Indiana comes up short in a close contest, the same question resurfaces. Why acquire depth if you're not going to trust it when the game is hanging in the balance? It's impossible not to wonder whether a different rotation, a fresh defender, or a spark off the bench could have shifted momentum at a critical moment. While Indiana struggled to find answers, the Valkyries fully embraced a physical and aggressive defensive approach from start to finish, and no player embodied that style more than Veronica Burton. From the opening tip to the final buzzer, Burton made life extremely difficult for Caitlin Clark. She applied constant pressure, stayed attached on nearly every possession, and turned every touch into a battle. The defense was relentless, highly physical, and at times pushed right up against the edge of what many fans believed should have been called more tightly by the officials.
Look at this. Look at this, bro!
Official review for...
Hit her all in the face. Veronica Burton been on one all game with Caitlin Clark. All game. Veronica Murray made it her business to like disrupt Caitlyn and be just an asshole all game to her, bro. I can't stunt she-ball. Veronica Burton definitely.
Outside of Caitlin Clark, Indiana's offense often looked disconnected and out of rhythm throughout the night. Kelsey Mitchell logged more than 30 minutes on the floor, yet finished with just 14 points while shooting 5 for 13 from the field. Too often, she attacked crowded driving lanes, forcing difficult attempts against multiple defenders instead of kicking the ball out to open teammates. Those possessions repeatedly ended with the Valkyries' interior defense shutting down the play. Even Sophie Cunningham, who made history as the recipient of Clark's milestone 500th career assist, had a difficult shooting night. Cunningham was on the court for nearly 25 minutes and scored 11 points, but she connected on only 4 of her 11 shot attempts. Her struggles were even more noticeable from long range, where she went just 1 for 7 from three-point territory. Aaliyah Boston battled hard and contributed across the stat sheet, grabbing 6 rebounds and handing out 4 assists. However, she was held to 13 points while shooting 4 for 11 from the floor. As a whole, Indiana's starting unit never seemed to find a consistent offensive rhythm and spent much of the game searching for answers. Yet despite the missed shots, the frustration, and the overall offensive inconsistency, there was one major positive that emerged from the night. One player refused to let the moment overwhelm her. Let's talk about Raven Johnson. While much of the Fever offense struggled to establish any momentum, Johnson stepped onto the floor and provided a spark. She played 21 minutes and 20 seconds, and she maximized every second of that opportunity. Her energy, confidence, and impact stood out at a time when Indiana desperately needed someone to step up.
Clocks, man, my goodness, man. Now I gotta talk about Raven Johnson. Career game, man. 16 points, 7 to 10 from the field, just outstanding. She shot 90% from 3. Now it's a 2-point game. Come on, Kelsey Mitchell.
Raven Johnson delivered one of the most efficient performances of the night. She poured in 16 points while shooting an outstanding 7 for 10 from the field, good for an incredible 70% shooting clip. She also knocked down 2 of her 3 attempts from beyond the arc. On a night when Indiana struggled to generate consistent offense, Johnson was arguably the most effective scorer on the floor. Not Caitlin Clark, not Kelsey Mitchell, not Aaliyah Boston. Raven Johnson, the rookie that many critics overlooked and many fans barely expected to see in a significant role, stepped off the bench and finished with a team best +4 rating. More importantly, her production helped keep Indiana within striking distance throughout the game. Without her contribution, the Fever likely never would have had a chance in the closing moments. That's what makes this loss even more frustrating. The player shooting 70% from the field and providing a spark offensively spent a large portion of the game waiting on the bench, while the team searched for answers elsewhere. Still, even with Johnson's impressive performance, the outcome ultimately came down to the final possession. Indiana trailed by just 2 points. The scoreboard read 90-88. With the game hanging in the balance, the Fever got one last opportunity to either tie the game or steal a dramatic victory. The atmosphere inside Chase Center was intense, and every possession suddenly carried enormous weight. This is where great teams and great coaching staffs are expected to shine. These are the moments when a carefully designed play can create separation, generate a clean look, and put the ball in the hands of your biggest star. Instead, as the final seconds ticked away, everything seemed to unravel. The offensive spacing broke down almost immediately. Players appeared uncertain about where to be, and the possession quickly turned chaotic. Aaliyah Boston eventually attacked the basket, trying to rescue the play as time expired. She drove aggressively into traffic, appeared to absorb significant contact, and still no foul was called. The whistle never came. For much of the night, officials had been active, assessing fouls throughout the game and sending players to the line. Indiana alone was charged with 24 fouls. Yet on the possession that mattered most, when the outcome was still undecided, the officials chose not to intervene. That decision will undoubtedly remain a major talking point. But even with the controversy surrounding the no call, the larger question centers on what happened from the Fever bench. As the clock continued to run and the possession grew more disorganized, Stephanie White still had a timeout available. She had an opportunity to stop play, regroup her team, settle the confusion, and design a cleaner final look. Instead, the timeout remained unused. While the action became increasingly frantic and players appeared to be improvising on the fly, White watched the possession play out without stopping the game. By the time the final seconds disappeared, Indiana's last chance had slipped away, leaving fans wondering why that timeout was never used when the season's most important possession was unfolding right in front of them.
Oh my God, bro. Correlation said, I just don't understand how Steph watched that possession and didn't call a timeout earlier. I'm so annoyed. I absolutely despise the last possession. I'm just shaking my head. Stephanie White completely. Let's see. Let's see this last.
With just 0.5 seconds remaining, Indiana was left with an almost impossible situation. A rushed, off-balance catch-and-shoot attempt was all they could generate. The shot never had a real chance. The buzzer sounded and the game was over, and that's where this story becomes so difficult to process. On one hand, Caitlin Clark accomplished something truly historic. She became the fastest player in WNBA history to reach both 1,000 career points and 500 career assists, eclipsing a list of all-time greats and further cementing her place among the league's most impactful young stars. That achievement cannot be ignored. It is official, it is permanent, and it deserves to be celebrated. At the same time, the night was far from perfect. Clark finished just 3 for 12 from the field, picked up a technical foul after repeatedly expressing frustration with the officiating, and was charged with 5 turnovers. Meanwhile, players such as Michaela Timpson and Damiris Dantas never got an opportunity to contribute, spending the entire game on the bench despite Indiana desperately searching for answers. That's what makes this loss so frustrating. The Fever continue to find themselves in situations where historic accomplishments and painful defeats happen on the very same night. They are capable of producing unforgettable moments while simultaneously letting winnable games slip away. If there was one major bright spot to take from this game, it was Raven Johnson. Her performance may have been the most encouraging development of the entire evening. She provided efficient scoring, energy, and stability when Indiana needed it most. The big question moving forward is whether Stephanie White will reward that production with a larger role and more consistent minutes going forward. Now the Fever enter a critical portion of the season. Every game carries increased importance, not only for playoff positioning, but also for confidence and momentum inside the locker room. The margin for error is shrinking, and close losses like this become even more costly as the season progresses. As always, we'll continue breaking down the biggest moments, the key coaching decisions, the rotation choices, and the controversial calls that shape these games. Now I want to hear from you. Did this heartbreaking loss take attention away from Caitlin Clark's historic achievement, or should her record-setting milestone be the main story regardless of the final score? What did you think about the officiating throughout the game, and how concerned are you about Stephanie White's coaching decisions and game management in these close contests? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss any future coverage as we continue following every major development surrounding the Indiana Fever and the rest of the WNBA. I'll see you in the next one.